The Intergalactic Academy hung in the void like a crystal snowflake, its gleaming spires and transparent walkways defying not only gravity, but several other physical constants as well. Constructed at the nexus of 7 galactic arms, it represented the pinnacle of cooperative achievement between 32 sentient species. Its admission standards were legendary. Only 1 in 10 million applicants would ever walk its hallowed, gravity-free corridors, which made the presence of a 6-year-old human girl all the more remarkable. Ellie Matthews skipped, as much as one could skip in variable gravity, down the crystalline corridor, her dark curls bobbing with each movement. Small for her age by human standards, she was nonetheless nearly twice the mass of the average first-cycle student. Her eyes, wide and curious, took in everything: the shimmering quantum equations that danced along the walls, the bioluminescent guide markers that pulsed with directional information, the occasional teacher whose appendages or sensory organs twitched nervously as she passed. "Good morning, Professor Zrilvax," she chirped, as she passed a floating, crystalline entity whose facets refracted light into complex patterns that served as both communication and emotional expression. The crystalline being's facets dimmed slightly. "Good cycle, human child." It resonated, drifting slightly further away than protocol required. Ellie pretended not to notice. After 3 weeks at the academy, she had grown accustomed to such reactions. Her father had prepared her well, explaining that she would be the first human to attend the academy, and that many would view her with suspicion. "They call our home a Deathworld, sweetheart," he had explained while packing her favorite stuffed animal, a worn plush rabbit named Hoppy. "That means it's more dangerous than most planets that support intelligent life. Stronger gravity, more extreme temperatures, more aggressive fauna and flora. It makes us physically stronger than most species, but it also makes them a little afraid of us." "But I'd never hurt anyone," she had protested. Her father, Dr. James Matthews, whose revolutionary zero-point energy theories had rewritten fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics across 3 galaxies, had smiled gently. "I know that, and they'll learn it too. Just be patient with them, and always be kind." Now, as she entered the Infinite Evolution classroom, Ellie felt the familiar weight of dozens of alien gazes. The room was designed like a spiral, with learning pods arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Each pod adjusted to the physiological needs of its occupant: aquatic environments for the Hydrosapiens, methane atmosphere for the Triloths, high-pressure chambers for the dense cores. Ellie's pod was designed to simulate Earth-normal conditions. It looked painfully ordinary compared to the exotic environments surrounding her. As she settled into her pod, Professor Zix, an arachnoid being with 8 eyes and gleaming, metallic exoskeletal plates, began the day's lesson. "Today we continue our exploration of evolutionary efficiency across multiple dimensions." The professor's voice resonated through the direct neural interface that all students utilized. For Ellie, the translation manifested as crisp, British accented English in her mind. "We will examine the concept of biological refinement versus redundancy. The most evolved species, as we understand through the 11th principle of universal biology, eliminate inefficiencies over time." Ellie listened attentively, but a frown slowly formed on her face. When Professor Zixatera displayed a holographic model of various species' circulatory systems, including an oversimplified human model that was missing several crucial components, Ellie couldn't contain herself any longer. "Excuse me, Professor," she said, raising her hand as she had been taught was proper in the academy. "I believe the human model is incorrect." The classroom fell silent. Professor Zixtara's carapace shifted to a darker hue, a sign of irritation that Ellie had learned to recognize. "The models are standardized and approved by the Galactic Biological Council." "Young human," the professor replied. "Perhaps your understanding is limited by your developmental stage." Ellie bit her lip but persisted. The model shows only a single route for blood flow, but human hearts have 4 chambers and a complex system of arteries and veins that provide redundancy. If one pathway is blocked, blood can often find alternative routes. It's not inefficient, it's adaptively resilient. Several students emitted sounds of surprise or disbelief. A Trilaxian student near her, a gaseous entity contained within a mobile spherical unit, pulsed with colors that Ellie had come to recognize as derision. Typical Deathworlder thinking, the Trilaxian commented through the class channel, mistaking brute survivability for elegance. Professor Zixtara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign that Ellie recognized as the arachnoid equivalent of clearing one's throat for attention. The human child raises an interesting point about different evolutionary approaches, the professor stated diplomatically. However, the consensus remains that true evolutionary advancement trends toward efficiency rather than redundancy. The fact that humans require sleep for nearly a third of their life cycle is evidence enough of their biological inefficiency. Several students emitted sounds or gestures of agreement. Ellie felt her cheeks grow hot, but remembered her father's advice. Don't let them see you angry. Let them see you think. Sleep serves multiple functions for human cognition, she replied carefully, including memory consolidation and creative problem-solving. Some of our greatest scientific discoveries have come after periods of sleep. An inefficient way to process information, countered another student, a luminous, floating jellyfish-like creature. Continuous consciousness allows for uninterrupted data analysis. Ellie was about to respond when Professor Zixtara intervened. This digression, while anthropologically interesting, takes us away from today's curriculum. We will continue with the established evolutionary models. Throughout the rest of the lesson, Ellie remained quiet, but her mind raced. She had prepared extensively for the academy, studying alien biology and physics well beyond the level expected for her age. Her father had spent years teaching her, knowing that one day she might have this opportunity. The academy had initially rejected her application, citing her species and age. But her father's reputation, and a series of aptitude tests that she had aced, had eventually convinced the admissions council to make an unprecedented exception. As the class ended, Ellie carefully packed her quantum tablet and prepared to move to her next lesson. As she exited her pod, the Trilaxian student hovered nearby. You should not have contradicted the professor, the gaseous being stated, its containment sphere pulsing with orange and red hues. It demonstrates the primitive nature of your species. Ellie remembered the cookies in her pack. Her father had helped her bake them the night before, explaining that sharing food was a universal gesture of friendship in nearly all cultures. Would you like a cookie? She offered, holding out a small, star-shaped treat. They're made with carbon compounds that should be compatible with your biochemistry. The Trilaxian's colors shifted to a confused swirl of blue and purple. After a moment of hesitation, a small manipulator arm extended from its containment unit and delicately accepted the cookie. Your offering is unexpected, the being commented as it analyzed the treat with an internal sensor. It contains no harmful substances. Of course not, Ellie replied with a smile. Why would I want to harm a classmate? Before the Trilaxian could respond, the classroom door dilated open, and an administrative drone hovered in. Student Ellie Matthews, your presence is required in Principal Administrator Cusack-Villi's office immediately. Ellie's heart sank. She had only been called to the principal administrator's office once before, on her first day, when the imposing, multi-limbed cephalopod had explained in excruciating detail how the admission council had calculated an 87.3% probability of a catastrophic incident resulting from her attendance, but had been overruled by the Intergalactic Education Charter's non-discrimination clauses. I'll be right there, she replied, gathering her things. As she followed the drone through the twisting corridors, she noticed other students and faculty watching her pass. Their expressions or biological equivalents, ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The principal administrator's office was located in the central spire of the academy, a vast chamber with views of the surrounding starscape from every angle. When Ellie entered, she found not only Principal Cusack-Villi waiting, but also Professor Zixtera, whose metallic exoskeleton now gleamed with an ominous dark blue sheen. "Ellie Matthews," Principal Cusack-Villi began, its tentacles rippling in what Ellie had learned was a sign of discomfort. "We have received a complaint regarding your behavior in Professor Zixtera's Infinite Evolution class." Ellie swallowed hard. "I only asked a question about the human circulatory system. Administrator, you challenged established academic consensus," Professor Zixtera interjected, mandibles clicking rapidly. "More concerning, you exhibited typical Deathworlder aggression in your persistence." "I wasn't being aggressive," Ellie protested, her voice small in the cavernous room. "I was just trying to explain." "Your vocal patterns registered at 15% higher amplitude than classroom norms," the professor continued. "Your heart rate increased by 22%, and your skin flushed with blood, all biological indicators of aggression in your species." Ellie felt tears welling in her eyes. "That's embarrassment, not aggression. I was nervous because everyone was staring at me." Principal Cusack-Villi's primary eyes fixed on her, while its secondary eyes rotated to observe various holographic displays of Ellie's biometric data. "The disciplinary committee has recommended a 3-cycle probation period," the principal stated. "During this time, any further disruptions will result in immediate suspension and possible expulsion." "But I didn't do anything wrong!" Ellie couldn't help the tears that now spilled down her cheeks. Professor Zixtera's carapace darkened further. "The human is now secreting saline fluid. Is this another aggressive display?" "No, it's crying," Ellie explained, wiping her eyes. "It happens when we're sad or upset." "Fascinating," the principal commented, a tentacle reaching for a data stylus to note this information. "Nevertheless, the probation stands. Your father's contributions to science earned you this opportunity. Ellie Matthews, do not squander it with Deathworlder emotional volatility." Just as Ellie was about to respond, a chime sounded, and a holographic projection materialized in the center of the room. It showed her father, his kind face looking unusually serious. "Principal Administrator Cusack-Villi, Professor Zixtera," he greeted formally. "I've received an automated alert regarding a disciplinary meeting involving my daughter. I request a 5-minute delay before any decisions are finalized. I am currently approaching the academy and will arrive momentarily." Both aliens visibly tensed. The principal's tentacles contracted, and the professor's limbs pulled closer to its body in a defensive posture. "Dr. Matthews," Principal Cusack-Villi acknowledged, its voice modulating to a more formal tone. "Your presence was not requested for this standard disciplinary procedure. Nevertheless, according to Section 73.4 of the Academy Charter, guardians have the right to be present during any disciplinary action involving underage students." Ellie's father replied, his voice calm but firm. "I'll see you in approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The hologram disappeared, leaving an uncomfortable silence in its wake. "Your father appears to be quite involved in your education," Principal Cusack-Villi observed, a hint of unease in its modulated voice. "He's the best dad in the universe," Ellie replied, a small smile breaking through her tears. For the first time since entering the office, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next 4 minutes passed in awkward silence. The principal busied itself reviewing data screens, while Professor Zixtera remained unnaturally still, only the occasional twitch of a mandible betraying its discomfort. Precisely 4 minutes and 28 seconds after his hologram had disappeared, the office door dilated open, and Dr. James Matthews walked in. He was of average height for a human male, with the same dark curly hair as his daughter, though flecked with gray at the temples. He wore a simple black suit and carried nothing but a sleek metal pen in his breast pocket. His face was composed, his steps measured as he crossed the room to stand beside Ellie. "Hello, sweetheart," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Ellie nodded, feeling instantly calmer with her father beside her. "Dr. Matthews," Principal Cusack-Villi began, tentacles now fully extended in a formal greeting posture. "We appreciate your interest in this matter, but I assure you, this is a routine disciplinary procedure." "Is it?" James Matthews asked, his voice still remarkably calm. "Because from what I understand, my 6-year-old daughter asked a question in class about human biology, was ridiculed by her peers, dismissed by her teacher, and is now facing probation for what exactly? Challenging established academic consensus and displaying aggressive behavioral patterns," Professor Zix-Tara stated, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Ah," James nodded thoughtfully. "And did anyone explain to Ellie that questions about her own species' biology would be considered challenges to academic consensus, or that her natural emotional responses would be interpreted as aggression?" When neither alien responded, James continued, "I understood that the Academy prided itself on fostering intellectual curiosity and diverse perspectives. Has that policy changed?" "The Academy maintains the highest standards of academic freedom," Principal Cusack-Villi asserted, its tentacles now moving in patterns that indicated increasing stress. "However, order must be maintained in the classroom." "Of course," James agreed reasonably. "Order is important, so is accuracy. The human circulatory model that was presented today was, in fact, inaccurate. My daughter was correct." "The models are approved by the Galactic Biological Council," Professor Zix-Tara insisted, its carapace now pulsing between dark blue and purple, colors that Ellie recognized as indicating both anger and fear. "The same council that still classifies Earth as a Class X death world, based on a 1,000-year-old preliminary survey, despite updated information provided by the Human Exploration Corps," James asked, raising an eyebrow. "Scientific consensus should evolve with new data. Professor, isn't that the foundation of the very evolution you teach?" The professor's mandibles clicked rapidly, but produced no coherent response. James turned his attention back to the principal. "I have a proposition. Instead of placing my daughter on probation for asking questions, which is, I believe, the purpose of education, perhaps we could use this as an opportunity for cultural exchange. Ellie could prepare a presentation on human biology for her class, supervised by Professor Zix-Tara, to ensure academic rigor." Before the principal could respond, Professor Zix-Tara's carapace darkened to nearly black. "Unacceptable. The human child has already disrupted my carefully structured curriculum. I will not have my authority undermined further by allowing a primitive species to—" The professor's words cut off abruptly, as it noticed something odd. The stylus that had been sitting on the principal's desk was now floating, suspended in midair. Around the room, other small objects, data pads, ornamental crystals, even the moisture droplets from Ellie's tears, had begun to rise from their surfaces. Only then did both aliens notice that James Matthews was holding his metal pen, rolling it thoughtfully between his fingers. "I apologize for the interruption, Professor," James said, his voice still impossibly calm. "You were saying something about primitive species?" The gravity in the room began to shift, subtly at first, then more dramatically. The principal found its tentacles being gently but inexorably pressed against the ceiling, while Professor Zix-Tara's 8 legs scrambled for purchase as it slowly lifted from the floor. "What? What is happening?" the principal managed to ask, its voice modulator straining to maintain coherence as its body was compressed against the ceiling. "A simple localized gravitational anomaly," James explained, still seated calmly beside his daughter, who looked up at him with wide, surprised eyes. "A practical application of my zero-point energy manipulation theories. Nothing to be concerned about." "This is assault!" Professor Zixtara exclaimed, its voice rising in pitch as it found itself completely inverted, pressed against the ceiling alongside the principal. Not at all, James replied mildly. Just a physics demonstration. The academy is, after all, a place of learning. He looked up at the two aliens, his expression still serene. Now, I believe we were discussing my daughter's education. Specifically, the fact that she has been subjected to inaccurate information, social isolation, and now disciplinary action for the crime of asking a question. The metal pen rotated once in his hand, and the gravitational pressure increased slightly. Small objects around the room began to orbit in complex patterns, some forming the mathematical symbol for infinity. My daughter will not be placed on probation, James continued, his voice never rising, his expression never changing. She will be treated with the same respect and academic consideration as any other student. The human biological models in the curriculum will be updated for accuracy. And most importantly, no one, here, for the first time, a hint of steel entered his voice. No one will make her cry again. Through their neural interfaces, both the principal and professor received an incoming data packet, a comprehensive, meticulously detailed research paper on human circulatory systems, complete with three-dimensional models and comparative analyses with 17 other species. I've taken the liberty of providing updated information for the curriculum, James explained. Peer-reviewed and verified by 3 independent xenobiologists, including 2 from species represented on the Galactic Biological Council. The pen rotated once more in his hand, and gradually, the gravitational anomaly began to normalize. The floating objects gently returned to their original positions, and the 2 aliens were slowly lowered back to the floor. Now, James said, rising and straightening his jacket, I believe Ellie has a quantum mathematics class in approximately 12 minutes. She wouldn't want to be late. He extended his hand to his daughter, who took it with a mixture of awe and relief. Principal Kuzvili, its tentacles now trembling slightly, managed to regain some composure. Dr. Matthews, what you've just demonstrated is concerning. The Academy's security systems should have prevented any unauthorized manipulation of fundamental forces within these walls. Yes, they should have, James agreed pleasantly. Perhaps your engineers might want to review those systems. I'd be happy to consult, of course. He turned to leave, Ellie's small hand still firmly in his, but paused at the door. Oh, and Principal Administrator, I've also taken the liberty of submitting an application to your physics department. I believe there's an opening for a visiting professor next semester. My research on emotional gravitational interactions in quantum fields might be of interest to your students. The door dilated open, and James led Ellie out, leaving behind 2 thoroughly shaken alien administrators and a room full of perfectly arranged objects that seemed, somehow, to have shifted ever so slightly from where they had been before. As they walked down the corridor, Ellie looked up at her father with wide eyes. Dad, how did you do that? You never told me you could control gravity. James smiled down at her. There's a lot about quantum physics that isn't in the textbooks yet, sweetheart. Some theories need to be tested in practical situations. Were you scared? She asked. Of standing up for you? He squeezed her hand. Never. But I was disappointed that your teachers couldn't see how special you are without a demonstration. Ellie considered this. Will I be able to do that too someday? Make things float? With enough study and understanding of how the universe works? Absolutely. He tapped her on the nose affectionately. But remember what I always tell you. Knowledge is the greatest power, she completed with a grin. And with great power comes great responsibility, he finished. Now, let's get you to quantum mathematics. And afterward, maybe we can bake some more cookies for your classmates. Even for Professor Zixitara? Ellie asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. James laughed. Especially for Professor Zixtera. Nothing builds bridges like kindness after a misunderstanding. As they continued down the crystal corridor, other students and faculty who had heard rumors of what had transpired moved respectfully aside, watching the human father and daughter with new eyes, eyes that held a mixture of wariness, curiosity, and something that hadn't been present before, respect. The following week brought remarkable changes to Ellie's academy experience. The first notable difference appeared in her infinite evolution class, where Professor Zixtara, now displaying a carapace color that Ellie had never seen before, a subdued lavender that the translation matrix identified as professional caution, introduced a completely revised unit on comparative xenobiology. Today, the professor announced to the class, we will be examining the concept of evolutionary diversity through the lens of adaptive resilience rather than pure efficiency. The holographic display now showed significantly more detailed models of various species' biological systems, including an accurate representation of human physiology. As you can see, Professor Zixtara continued, mandibles moving with precise, academic cadence. Different evolutionary paths have produced varying solutions to similar challenges. The redundancy present in certain systems. Here, the professor paused momentarily, multifaceted eyes, briefly focusing on Ellie. Represents not inefficiency, but adaptive resilience in response to high-stress environments. Several students glanced in Ellie's direction, their expressions or biological equivalents ranging from curiosity to newfound interest. The Trilaxian, who had mocked her the previous week, pulsed with a complex pattern of blues and greens that the translation matrix interpreted as respectful reconsideration. After class, as Ellie gathered her materials, Professor Zixtara approached her pod. Student Matthews, the arachnoid, began formally. I wish to acknowledge that your observations regarding human circulatory systems were not without merit. The revised curriculum will incorporate a more nuanced approach to evolutionary diversity. Ellie smiled brightly. Thank you, Professor. I brought something for you. She reached into her pack and produced a small container. My dad and I made these cookies specially formulated for arachnoid biochemistry. They contain calcium compounds that should complement your exoskeletal maintenance cycle. The professor's mandibles twitched in what might have been surprise. After a moment's hesitation, it extended a delicate manipulator and accepted the gift. This is unexpected, the professor commented, its carapace shifting to a lighter shade of lavender. Thank you, Student Matthews. You're welcome, Ellie replied cheerfully. Learning goes both ways, doesn't it? Throughout the academy, other changes became apparent. The engineering department announced an immediate upgrade to the gravitational stabilization systems, citing recently identified vulnerabilities. The Galactic Biological Council issued a formal review of all xenobiological classification standards, with particular emphasis on adaptive resilience in high-stress evolutionary environments. Most noticeably, Dr. James Matthews' application for a visiting professorship was approved with unprecedented speed. His proposed course, Emotional Gravitational Interactions in Quantum Fields, a New Paradigm, became the most requested elective in academy history, with a waiting list that included not only students, but senior faculty from multiple departments. For Ellie, the most significant change was in her daily interactions. Where once she had faced isolation and suspicion, she now found herself surrounded by curious classmates, eager to learn about the strange Deathworlder in their midst. Is it true your father can manipulate fundamental forces with his mind? Asked a nervous photosynthetic student, whose leafy appendages quivered with excitement. Not with his mind, Ellie corrected, remembering her father's emphasis on scientific accuracy. He uses technology based on zero-point energy principles. The pen helps focus the field. But the Academy's nullification barriers should prevent any unauthorized force manipulation, insisted a quantum student, whose body existed simultaneously in three probability states. Our defense systems are based on fundamental principles that cannot be circumvented. Ellie shrugged. Dad says most barriers are just theories. Someone hasn't questioned yet. This comment spread through the academy faster than an uncontained plasma discharge, eventually reaching the Security Council, whose members immediately scheduled an emergency review of all defensive protocols. Meanwhile, Dr. Matthews settled comfortably into his role as visiting professor. His lectures consistently overflowed with attendees, forcing the academy to allocate one of the largest auditoriums for his classes. Conventional quantum theory treats emotional states as irrelevant to field manipulation. He explained to his rapt audience during his inaugural lecture. This represents a fundamental misunderstanding of consciousness as a quantum force. When we recognize that emotional energy is not separate from, but integral to the quantum field, new possibilities emerge. As a demonstration, he caused a small sphere of water to form complex geometric patterns that shifted in response to emotional inputs from volunteers. The resulting paper, published in the Intergalactic Journal of Quantum Physics, sparked a revolution in theoretical physics across 7 galaxies. For Principal Cusack-Svili, these developments represented both a challenge and an opportunity. During a private meeting with Dr. Matthews, the cephalopod administrator tentatively raised the subject of their previous encounter. Your demonstration of gravitational manipulation was most impressive, the principal acknowledged, tentacles arranging themselves in a pattern indicating professional respect tinged with lingering wariness. Though I must express concern about potential safety implications. James Matthews smiled politely. Safety has always been my primary concern, Principal Administrator, particularly the safety and well-being of my daughter. Yes, well, the principal continued, a slight ripple passing through its tentacles. The Academy has implemented your suggested revisions to our biological curriculum and security protocols. We are also reviewing our cultural integration procedures to better accommodate diverse physiological responses. Excellent, James replied warmly. I've always believed that the greatest scientific advances come from embracing diversity rather than enforcing conformity. The universe is full of exceptions to our rules. That's where discovery happens. The principal's primary eyes fixed on James with newfound intensity. If I may ask a personal question, Dr. Matthews, why did you choose our academy for your daughter? Surely there are educational institutions within human space that would have been more comfortable for her. James considered the question carefully. Comfort rarely leads to growth. Principal Administrator, I wanted Ellie to understand the universe in all its vast diversity, to see beyond the limitations of human perspective. And yes, I wanted her to face challenges, but fair ones, based on her abilities and character, not prejudices about her species. The principal's chromatophores pulsed with a pattern that indicated thoughtful consideration. A wise perspective. Perhaps we have been guilty of the same limited thinking we often attribute to younger species. We all have our blind spots, James replied graciously. The mark of true intelligence is the willingness to recognize and correct them. As the semester progressed, Ellie flourished at the academy. Her natural curiosity and genuine kindness gradually wore down even the most skeptical of her classmates. She formed an unlikely friendship with the Trilaxian student, whose name, a complex series of gaseous pressure differentials, she learned to pronounce perfectly. In return, the Trilaxian helped her understand the subtle nuances of multi-phase chemistry that had initially confused her. During a collaborative project in quantum mathematics, Ellie's team, consisting of herself, the Trilaxian, a crystalline entity, and a collective consciousness comprised of millions of microscopic organisms, developed a revolutionary approach to cross-dimensional calculation that earned them top honors and a special commendation from the Galactic Educational Authority. The Matthews Principle, as it came to be known, combined human intuitive reasoning with trilaxian phase shifting, crystalline precision, and the parallel processing power of collective consciousness. The resulting methodology reduced calculation time for complex quantum equations by 73.4%, while increasing accuracy by 28.9%. It worked because we're all different, Ellie explained during their presentation. Each of us saw a part of the problem that the others missed. The Academy's Quantum Mathematics Department immediately incorporated the Matthews Principle into its advanced curriculum, and research institutions across 3 galaxies began applying it to previously unsolvable equations. For James Matthews, watching his daughter's growth was the greatest reward. During their evening meals in their academy quarters, Ellie would excitedly recount her day's discoveries and interactions, her eyes shining with the pure joy of learning. "Dad," she asked one evening, as they shared a meal of synthesized earth foods, alongside alien delicacies she had developed a taste for, "do you think the other students like me now because of what you did, or because they actually want to be my friends?" James set down his fork and considered her question seriously. "A bit of both. Perhaps, at first. Fear can create respect, but it can't create genuine friendship. What you're seeing now is the result of your own actions, your kindness, your curiosity, your willingness to share and learn. Those qualities build real connections." Ellie nodded, processing this with the careful consideration she applied to all new information. "Professor Zixtara asked me to help develop new teaching materials about human biology for the younger classes. Is that because of fear too?" "Initially, perhaps," James acknowledged, "but the professor could have assigned that task to anyone with access to the correct information. Choosing you suggests recognition of your particular skills and perspective. That's not fear, that's respect." Ellie beamed at this, then suddenly looked thoughtful again. "Dad, will you teach me how to use your special pen someday?" James chuckled. "When you're older and have mastered the underlying principles, yes. But remember, knowledge first, application second," she recited dutifully. "Exactly." He reached across the table and gently tapped her nose. "The pen is just a tool. Ellie, the real power comes from understanding." Unknown to both of them, their conversation was being monitored, as were all communications within the Academy, by the Security Council. The recording was promptly classified at the highest security level and forwarded to the Galactic Scientific Authority with a special notation: "Potential paradigm-shifting technology, human origin. Recommend immediate research priority." As the academic year progressed toward its conclusion, preparations began for the annual exhibition, a prestigious event where exceptional students presented their work to representatives from research institutions, governmental bodies, and corporate entities from across the 7 galaxies. To everyone's surprise, except perhaps her father's, Ellie was selected as one of the 10 students to present, the youngest in the Academy's 10,000-year history. Her project, titled "Emotional Resonance in Cross-Species Communication, a Practical Application," combined elements of quantum physics, xenobiology, and linguistics into a comprehensive framework for enhanced understanding between diverse life forms. On the day of the exhibition, the Academy's Grand Hall was filled with dignitaries from hundreds of worlds. Ellie, dressed in a formal Academy uniform, specially tailored for her human physiology, waited nervously backstage with the other presenters. "Your cardiac rhythm indicates elevated stress," observed her trilaxian friend, whose containment sphere hovered supportively beside her. "Are you experiencing pre-presentation anxiety?" "A little," Ellie admitted with a smile. "It's a normal human response." "Your father's theories suggest that emotional states influence quantum interactions," the trilaxian noted. "Perhaps you could channel this anxiety into a positive force for your presentation." Ellie laughed. "That's actually a good idea. Dad says emotions are just energy looking for purpose." When her turn came, Ellie stepped onto the floating platform that would carry her to the center of the grand hall. As she rose above the assembled crowd, she caught sight of her father in the front row, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Beside him sat Principal Q6 Professor Zixtara, and several other faculty members who now watched her, with expressions ranging from curiosity to pride. "Distinguished guests," Ellie began, her voice clear and confident despite her nervousness. "I present today a framework for understanding that transcends traditional species barriers." Using holographic displays that responded to her gestures, Ellie demonstrated how emotional states created measurable quantum resonance patterns that could be detected, interpreted, and even replicated across widely divergent physiologies. "When a crystalline being experiences what we might call joy," she explained, indicating a complex refraction pattern. "The quantum signature bears remarkable similarities to a human's experience of the same emotion, despite our completely different biological structures." She proceeded to demonstrate a small device she had constructed, with her father's guidance, that could translate these emotional resonances in real time, allowing beings with no common sensory or communication systems to understand each other's emotional states. "Communication isn't just about exchanging information," she concluded. "It's about connecting experiences. When we truly understand how another being feels, barriers dissolve, fear becomes curiosity, strangers become friends." The silence that followed her presentation lasted precisely 3 seconds before the grand hall erupted in applause, expressed through a cacophony of sounds, light patterns, pheromone releases, and gravitational pulses appropriate to the diverse assemblage. The exhibition judges, a panel of renowned experts from various fields, awarded Ellie the highest honors, with a special commendation for extraordinary contribution to intergalactic understanding. In the reception that followed, Ellie found herself surrounded by representatives from research institutions, eager to adapt her framework for diplomatic, educational, and commercial applications. Standing beside her, fielding the more technical questions, James Matthews watched his daughter with undisguised pride. "Your offspring has demonstrated exceptional cognitive development," noted a quantum being whose existence manifested as a complex probability cloud. "Our records indicate human children of her developmental stage typically lack such advanced conceptual integration capabilities." "Ellie has always been special," James replied simply. "But then, I believe all children are, given the right opportunities and support." Across the reception hall, Principal Q6 engaged in animated conversation with representatives from the Galactic Educational Authority. The principal's tentacles moved in patterns indicating intense enthusiasm as it described the Academy's groundbreaking cultural integration initiatives and revolutionary approach to species diversity. No one mentioned that these initiatives had been hastily implemented following a certain gravitational anomaly in the principal's office. Some truths, it seemed, were understood without needing to be spoken. As the academic year drew to a close, Ellie prepared for the short break before the next semester would begin. She had already been guaranteed a place for the following year, with a newly created scholarship named, somewhat ironically, the Adaptive Resilience Award. On their last evening before departing for a brief visit to Earth, Ellie and her father took a walk along the Academy's observation promenade, a transparent crystal pathway that extended out into space, offering unobstructed views of the surrounding cosmos. "Will it be strange going back to Earth?" Ellie asked, as they gazed at the spiral arms of the nearest galaxy, its billions of stars creating patterns of light that had inspired poets and scientists alike for millennia. "A little," James admitted. "But it's good to remember where we come from, even as we explore where we might go." Ellie nodded thoughtfully, then looked up at her father. "Dad, that day in the principal's office, were you scared they might send me away?" James considered the question carefully. "Not scared, exactly. Concerned. Perhaps determined, certainly." "But you were so calm," she marveled. "Even when you made everything float." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Ellie, do you remember what I told you about Deathworlds and why other species sometimes fear humans?" "Because we're stronger?" "Physically, yes. But that's not what truly makes humans formidable." He knelt down to her level, his eyes meeting hers. "It's our capacity to remain calm and thoughtful, even in moments of great stress or danger. The most powerful force in the universe isn't gravity or electromagnetism. It's a mind that remains clear when everything around it is in chaos." Ellie considered this carefully. "Is that why you didn't yell at the principal or Professor Zixtera, even though they made me cry?" "Precisely," James nodded. "Anyone can shout or threaten. True power lies in control, especially self-control." As they turned to head back to their quarters, Ellie noticed something she hadn't seen before. Her father's special pen, tucked in his breast pocket, was emitting a faint blue glow. "Dad, your pen is glowing," she pointed out. James glanced down, seeming mildly surprised. "So it is." He removed the pen and examined it thoughtfully. "Interesting. The quantum field is particularly active tonight." "Is it dangerous?" Ellie asked, fascinated rather than fearful. "Not at all," he assured her, tucking the pen back into his pocket. "Just responsive. The universe is always listening, Ellie. Always reacting to our presence in ways we're only beginning to understand." As they walked back through the Academy's crystalline corridors, several students and faculty members greeted them with newfound warmth and respect. The Trilaxian student pulsed a friendly pattern of colors as it passed. Professor Zixitara's carapace glowed with a now familiar shade of professional courtesy as it nodded in acknowledgement. "See," James said quietly to Ellie. "No need for threats or displays of power. Just understanding, patience, and the occasional demonstration of alternative perspectives." Ellie giggled. "And cookies. Don't forget the cookies." "Ah, yes," James laughed. "Never underestimate the diplomatic power of baked goods." As they reached their quarters, Ellie looked up at her father with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "Do you think I'll ever understand all the things you know, Dad?" James Matthews looked down at his remarkable daughter, this small human who had already begun to change the perceptions of an entire interstellar academic community, and smiled warmly. "I have no doubt whatsoever that you'll understand far more than I ever could. Ellie, the universe is just waiting for you to ask the right questions." In his pocket, unseen by either of them, the metal pen pulsed once more with that strange blue light, as if in agreement with his words. Somewhere in the vast quantum fields that permeated all of existence, something shifted ever so slightly, responding, perhaps, to the unique resonance of a Deathworlder's love for his child, and the limitless potential that lay in her future. The galaxy had indeed learned something about fear from James Matthews. Not fear of human strength or aggression, but fear of missing the extraordinary possibilities that arose when different perspectives came together in understanding. And in that lesson lay hope for a universe where differences weren't just tolerated, but celebrated as the true source of evolution's greatest achievements.